Hello, this is Cindy. I've created several podcasts for this course. These podcasts will supplement the information that you're given in the Haugen Academy modules. It does not replace it. I take the concepts that they talk about and I will show you an actual image from the code book using a document camera, or I will walk you through certain steps in building a code. I don't go into the depth that they go into in the modules, so my podcasts do not replace them. So you will have to definitely watch both the Haugen Academy modules and the podcast that I'm doing to get the most out of this course. This podcast will talk about the conventions. The conventions are just before the guidelines in the ICD-10 PCS codebook. Each character in a PCS code means something specific, and the conventions A1 through A5 relate to the values in those 7 characters. Convention A6 talks about the purpose of the index. The purpose of the index is to lead the coder to the correct table. You do not code from the index. Same thing in ICD-10 You did not ever code from the index. You always took the information the index gave you, went back to the tabular, and found your code. Similarly, in PCS, you're going to look at the information given to you in the index, and you're going to the table that you will be consulting to find the code. Convention A7 says it's not required to consult the index first. You can go straight to the tables, which is what I do. Once you know your body system and your root operation, you have a good start on which table you might be using to assign your code. Convention A8 is just telling us that all 7 characters have to be specified to be a valid code. Whereas in ICD-10 you use an X as a placeholder. In the case of a PCS code, you might use a Z when there is no device and no qualifier. Convention A9 talks about rows or swim lanes. Basically, it's saying that once you select a row or a body part, you must stay in that lane or in that row all the way across. You can't jump between the rows. And that is important in order that the proper combination of choices is found with characters 4 through 7. Convention A10 is about the word and. This is very similar to ICD-10 where the word and in a code description could mean and, or it could mean or. Same way here. So what we're going to do is walk through this procedure, which is an excerpt from an operative report. As we walk through this, finding this code, you are going to be answering certain questions in your mind that help you know how you're going to fill in the blank when you look at those 7 characters. Here is our excerpt. The patient sustained a severe tear of the left extensor carpi ulnaris muscle. It has not healed sufficiently on its own, so I have decided to insert a mesh of synthetic substitute to physically reinforce the muscle while it heals. That is just an excerpt. A lot more information would have been given in an operative report. But from this little excerpt, we will get some information. We know it's the muscle body system because he talks about the tear of the muscle, and the mesh is going to be used to reinforce the muscle. So we know it's the muscle body system. As far as root operation, the physician used the word insertion, but we have to ask ourselves, what is the intent of the procedure? And to do that, we have to know the full definition of the root operations. So let's work on building the PCS code for this procedure. I have pasted here on the right the full definitions of the root operations, insertion, and supplement. One of the guidelines you'll be looking at a little bit later when you get to B guidelines are that we have to follow the full definition when we are choosing a root operation. In this particular procedure, the physician inserted a mesh of synthetic substitute to physically reinforce the muscle while it heals. Even though the verb insert is used, when you look at the full definition of those 2 root operations, supplement is the correct root operation. Insertion is not correct. The mesh that the physician is placing in the muscle to help it heal, to physically reinforce that muscle, is not monitoring, assisting, performing, or preventing a function. That synthetic substitute is simply there to physically reinforce the muscle. Those are subtle differences, but I found choosing the correct root operation is the most difficult part of building a PCS code, and it's the most difficult thing to teach. We really have to read a lot of operative reports and have a really good handle on the full definition of a root operation before we can assign a code with any ease at all. Okay, we know our body system is the muscles. The root operation is supplement. So when we get to our body part, where is the extensor carpi ulnaris muscle? We can either go to the table that we'll be using in this particular procedure, or we can look in the body part key, which is Appendix D, to see if we can find the term. In this case, we can. When we see the term extensor carpi ulnaris muscle, we see that the PCS value for that is the lower arm and wrist muscle left, because it's the left arm that the physician is talking about. The reason why this exercise comes up is because in the case of lower arm and wrist, in this case it's lower arm or wrist, and the muscle we're talking about is in the lower arm. So that's why I'm using this example. If you don't see the body part or the term you're looking for in the appendix, in the body part key, you can also Google it using a search engine, or you can look at an anatomy textbook to find out exactly where that muscle is. So here I have reproduced the table for the body system of muscles, root operation supplement, and you see the lower arm and wrist muscle left is character B, as in boy. It is an open approach, which our procedure in this case is the last line of that description. We already talked about a synthetic substitute, which is J, and then there is no qualifier in this case. So the PCS code for supplementing the left extensor carpi ulnaris muscle with synthetic substitute is 0KUB0JZ. Convention A11 tells us it's the coder's responsibility to determine what the documentation equates to. This is telling us, in other words, the physician is not expected to use the exact same terms that you use in the PCS codebook. It is the coder's job to figure out what the physician is saying, and usually if it's a well-written op report, you can do that. And if for some reason it is not clear, then you are going to query your physician. So here's an example. The surgeon dictated, he, quote, excised the patient's right breast. Then the operative note went on to say the entire breast and associated lymph nodes were removed. So the coder's rationale, we know, you should have read guideline B3.8. If the entire breast is removed, the root operation is resection, not excision. So even though the surgeon said he excised, since he removed the entire breast, you're going to use resection as your root operation. If he had dictated he only removed a part of the breast, then yes, the root operation would be excision. That's the end of our podcast for conventions A1 through A11. Please continue to watch the PowerPoint. The next one will be about the Med-Surg guidelines, B1 through B6. Thank you.